We gather to mourn a husband, a father, a patriarch, a brilliant engineer, a company president, a true Israeli, a true American, a man of deep intellect and curiosity, a man filled with boundless energy, boundless love, a mensch. We welcome those who are here in body, we welcome those who are here in spirit. כתוב במגילת קהלת, לכל זמן, ועת לכל חפץ תחת השמיים, עת ללדת ועת למות, עת לבכות ועת לשחוק, עת ספוד ועת רקוד, עת לשמור ועת להשליך, עת לקרוע ועת לתפור, עת לחשות ועת לדבר. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything. A time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing, a time for wailing, a time for birthing, a time for dying, a time for speaking, a time for silence, a time for seeking, a time for losing. We begin our memorial service today with recitation of psalms and prayers, linking this service to our tradition and our precious legacy. We'll begin with Psalm 23 in the Hebrew and then the English. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, binot deshiyar bitzeni, amei menuchot tina haleni, nafshi yeshoved yancheni b'maglei tzedek, leman shemo. Gam ki elech v'geit samavet, lo irara ki ata imadi. Shiftecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged zorirai. Dishantev Hashem en roshi kosi revaya. Ach tov v'chesed yedifuni kol yemei chayai. V'shavti b'beit Adonai le'orech yamim. Please join me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord. Our condolences, our warmth and our hugs go out to Uzi's family, his beloved wife Mickey, his children Amir and Amy, Ellie and Larry and Tammy, his sister Ada and her husband Yanai, his grandchildren Jacob and Daniel, Orly and Gabriel, and to all his friends and family, relatives and colleagues who are here to grieve and who are here to mourn. I'm so sorry for your loss. Today we give honor to Uzi's life from different perspectives and will lift his neshama through their words. Our rabbis teach in Pirkei Avot, Ha'omer sheli sheli v'shelcha shelcha zu midat benonit. One who says, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. This is someone with average qualities. Someone who has an average, regular view of the world. Someone who gives and receives. And when he gives, there's an expectation of reciprocation. And that's normal behavior. Chasid, sheli shelcha v'shelcha shelcha. A chasid is one who says, what's mine is yours, and what's yours is yours. This is a chasid. Someone who gives with no expectation of reciprocation. This is a pious man. When it came to his family, Uzi was a true chasid. He gave to his children, to his grandchildren, with no expectation in return. He gave them love generously. He was devoted to them selflessly. And as a result, they are now moved to offer their tribute today. And so we begin with his children, Amir, Ellie, and Tammy, and his grandchildren, Jacob and Daniel.
Everyone in this room knew my father in one way or another. Some knew him as a devoted and loyal friend. Some knew him as a brilliant and energetic engineering executive. Some knew him as an active investor in various enterprises. Others knew him as a passionate advocate for Israel and Israeli issues. Still others knew him as a lover of music, sports, and travel. I knew him in all of those roles, but more importantly, I knew him as my father and the head of our family. To me, he was always Abba. The most important thing in the world to my father was his family. He and my mother were married for 56 and a half years, since Lag BaOmer of 1959. I learned from them the importance of love and the importance of having a true life partner. He and my mother raised me and my two sisters, always providing us unconditional love and support and appropriate guidance. He was always there for us in any way we needed. And when Amy and I married, he truly loved her as a member of the family. However, the extent of his love and devotion for his 4 grandchildren is nearly impossible to fully articulate, but I'll try to capture it in one story. Jacob, our son, and my father's oldest grandson, was born in January 1992. When Amy was about 39 weeks pregnant, she went to the OB for a routine checkup, and she was feeling fine, and the OB assured her that she would probably not deliver for at least another week or 2. My father was in New York for a meeting that day and had reservations to fly to London that evening. Of course, before he got on the plane, he called Amy and called me and was reassured that he should go because there was no grandchild on the horizon. He got on the flight. Of course, a couple of hours later, Amy went into labor. Abba landed in London, immediately got on the next flight from London to Houston to make it back to see his first grandchild. From that day on, he would always do anything and everything for his grandchildren. My father was my role model in many ways, and I learned the important things in life from him. I learned about integrity, about loyalty, about the difference between right and wrong, about working hard, about the value of education and lifelong learning, about giving back, and most importantly, the importance of being devoted to your family. My father was a good man. I will always be proud of him. I will always love him, and I will always miss him.
The world will never be the same. I purposely did not qualify this to say my world will never be the same. Absolutely and too certainly, my world will never be the same. But in the same way that my father was ever present in my life, he was also always a bigger part of the world at large. My father, Abba, Uzi, or Saba, as he is most affectionately known, especially by those whom he loved most, lived every moment of his life in a big way with a big heart. He thought deeply, acted with passion and affection, and touched everyone in his universe in his own bold and unique way. In receiving many heartfelt emails, texts, and calls from friends and family, I have been reminded that my father is best described in 2 words: love and generosity. As Amir stated, his love was first and foremost for family. As the eldest son of the eldest of 6 children, my father has a huge extended family in Israel. Despite having left 40 years ago, he was the glue that brought the family together. For Pesach, more than a dozen years ago, my father organized orchestrated a family reunion attended by tens of aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, grandparents, and grandchildren, and a quarter-inch thick family tree was bound and distributed. We were hoping to do similar, maybe minus the book, next year in Jerusalem, to celebrate his and my mom's 160th or respective 80th birthdays. For our wedding reception in Israel, he had to cut off the list at first cousins only, as that alone turned into 100+ people. His sister, my Aunt Ada, and her eldest son, Erez, we were hoped to be in the air as we speak, en route to Houston. Arriving tomorrow, hampered by the need for a visa in this post-9/11 world. It's too bad my dad's not around, as I'm confident he could have arranged something. His love for family is evidenced clearly by a simple review of his cell phone. It is filled with pictures of his grandchildren and brings us a bittersweet joy when we saw the ever-present screensaver, a shot of him and our daughter Orly perched happily on his lap. Nothing pleased him more than getting that weekly phone call from her and her brother Gabriel to wish him and Safta Shabbat Shalom. He took immense vicarious pride in each and every one of our accomplishments, big and no matter how small. Daniel's baseball, Jacob's photography, golf, their graduations, working in the energy industry. Daniel's baseball, yes, I know, I said it twice. There were a lot of games, and Saba raved about every pitch and every at-bat and every game. Every new song or prayer Orly learned, and each of Gaby's learning exploits, whether it be balancing on a scooter, catching a ball with a lacrosse stick, or his progress towards potty training. Yes, we're still in progress. My accomplishments varied from being a ski bum, not initially well received, to going to Tech, his adopted alma mater, where he got his executive MBA and proudly won the business simulation called Tycoon. Just to show you how small the world is, has anyone ever heard that phrase from my father? It was one of his most common. When you heard it, we heard it often, you knew a story was coming. It was going to be a long one, but you knew that you would find it extremely intriguing. And then he would accurately and with surgical precision and extreme detail tell you how the second cousin of his mother's uncle, who was married to the former prime minister of the country that no longer exists, but was known as the former so-and-so, was married to his great-aunt's uncle. You get the picture. And they were coincidentally sitting next to him on his most recent flight to Israel, or Antarctica, or Tibet, or Timbuktu, to attend, of all the things, the same conference he was going to. You can't think of my father without thinking of travel. I remember as a child, when asked what my father did, I would explain that he was an engineer, but not the kind on a train, because that was my reference point. I remember going to his office and playing with his level, enjoying watching the bubble moving, and climbing hills of sulfur at refineries. But there were times, still now, when I truly wondered if he was a Mossad agent. It became a family joke. Countless examples of his business travel overlapping in cities where news events occurred simultaneously. Once, I had the pleasure of meeting him for dinner in Paris. I had been working in Prague. He selected a nondescript restaurant far off the beaten path, definitely not in any tour books. The primary room of the restaurant was full, so we were put in another section, just ourselves. I went to the bathroom, and upon my return, another table of people had arrived, and my father was engaged in conversation. He had recognized one of the gentlemen, President Gemayel of Lebanon, who had fled the country that morning via motorboat, and no one knew where he was. Having dinner with my Abba, where else? His love for Israel knew no bounds. AIPAC, Technion, investment in startups. Orly and I had the privilege and honor of being present last year when he was awarded an honorary degree from the Technion. He was introduced as Hoveve Zion to a cheer from the audience, a friend of Zion, and spoke on behalf of all 7 recipients. The ceremony happened to take place on Father's Day, and he began his speech by looking towards heaven and thanking his parents, always family. And last, but definitely not least, his love of life, laughter, and practical jokes known as kunsim, and to whom the jokes never got old, regardless of the age of the jokey. Numerous birthdays had my father wrapping empty boxes, placing boxes within boxes, fake watches in place of the valuable real ones, same with jewelry, and countless gags we got for finding the afikoman. A kid at heart, despite the graying hair, always with a twinkle in his eye. So that's love. My father was exceedingly generous with his love, with his time, and with his means. His generosity was greatest when it intersected with his love for family. Before the advent of cell phones, when I called home, he would immediately call back so it would be on his dime. He would do anything to facilitate family togetherness. For the past 7 years, we all went to Cancun. Initially, it was to celebrate Daniel's bar mitzvah, but he and we had such a great time, it became a tradition. I was going to share that this was the first ever trip to Houston that I personally paid for. But that would be a lie, because even now, he is facilitating togetherness. Saba was the consummate teacher. When he helped me with my high school homework, he would drive me crazy. All I wanted were the answers. He would insist on working through and teaching me the concepts. As a result, I placed out of my first year of calculus at college, but without his patient tutoring, I found myself floundering in year 2 and ultimately withdrew from the course. Was he disappointed? Not for a minute. He supported me in each and every decision, regardless if he agreed with them. My father helped all of us in work, including Amy and Larry, and mentored the next generation, Jacob, in his field of petroleum. As recently as last week, he helped Orly with her Hebrew homework when Aunt Tammy, caring for the kids while Larry and I were in India, needed a helpline. For Tammy, he proceeded to call every day to see if additional follow-up help was needed. 2 simple words to sum up 79 years: love and generosity. The Torah teaches us that love doesn't die. People do. Truer words cannot be spoken. I will love my father until my last breath, and know in my heart that generations to come will carry on his memory and his love. And following in his footsteps, I want to say Toda Rabbah for your generosity, for your undying kindness, understanding, and affection. Thank you for everything. I love you. We love you.
Abba, you left us too soon and without warning. I can't believe you're gone. I keep thinking that my cell phone will ring. You're just out of town for a few days. And any minute I'll hear you ask, "Tush, tush, how are you doing?" But I know that this time is different. I miss you already. You were the ideal combination of cheerleader and nudge with a dash of professor mixed in. You didn't always agree with what I was up to, like maybe when I volunteered for Obama in 2007. And I'm not quite sure you always understood my professional choices, like leaving McKinsey to become what you called a do-gooder. But you were always excited to hear about what I was doing and to help in every way that I could imagine or that you could imagine. I don't remember you ever said no. Rather, it was always how or when or why, or sometimes why not. I hope that I carry on even a small part of your extraordinary patience, your fierce loyalty, and your childlike sense of wonder and amusement. Abba, I love you.
Saba and I took a lot of drape trips together, and I have incredible memories of all of them. But what has stood out to me the most in the last couple of days has been our annual trip to D.C. for the AIPAC Policy Conference. As most of you know, Israel is incredibly important to our family. It was especially important to Saba that the first Halevy man to be born outside of Israel in 12 generations still felt the connection that Saba had to Israel. So for 5 of the last 6 years, I accompanied him to D.C. for Policy Conference. For the first couple of years, Safta would join us, But as her eyesight grew worse, she opted out of joining us in D.C., and I got to spend some quality time alone with Saba. Each of these trips to D.C. was special in its own right, but as the trip we had in March of this year that really stands out to me today. We weren't supposed to travel up to D.C. together that year because I wanted to go a day early and be with some of my friends. But as fate would have it, he changed his flight at the last minute and ended up in the seat next to me for our early morning flight to Dulles. Now, usually, Saba would sit down in his seat on the plane and be asleep before the door closed. But on this flight, for some reason, Saba felt more like talking than sleeping. For 2.5 hours, I had the best form of in-flight entertainment, Saba's stories. That day, he told me incredible stories about how he came from Jerusalem and navigated the world of Texas oil and gas. He explained how he worked his way up to become president of Litwin and built some of the world's largest refineries. He told me these stories at a time where I was just 8 months into my job in the very same industry he excelled in, a job where I found myself calling Saba to tap into his wealth of knowledge at least once a month. I learned a great deal about Saba's life that day, and he reminded me of when I would visit him in his old office when I was young and tell him how I wanted an office next to his one day. Saba was a great man and an even greater grandfather to me, Daniel, Orly, and Gabe. And all four of us know just how lucky we were to have him play such a large role in our lives. And while I will never have that office, I will always have my memories and my love for Saba.
For those of you who don't know, the Rockets won Saturday night 109-105 against the Los Angeles Clippers. James Harden had 46 points, and the game ended at 1:10 in the morning. The reason I'm saying this is not to fill everyone in on truly irrelevant sports statistics, especially on this afternoon, because every part of that game reminded me of my grandfather. For those of you who knew him, you knew he was a truly devoted sports fan, particularly a Houston Rockets fan. But just because the Rockets won a big game wasn't the reason last night resonated with me. It was the fact that it ended at 1 in the morning, oddly enough. To give a little background, my grandfather never missed a game, and he never missed a chance to stay up and watch his favorite teams play. Whether that was the 2:30 a.m. calls I received in September during the Astros playoff push, or a preseason Rockets game against Sacramento. The man was loyal and had the energy of my 3-year-old cousin Gabe. The same cannot be said about myself, though. I'm the baby when it comes to sleep, and I really don't like staying up late at all. But Saba didn't care, and once Jacob and I got cell phones, sleeping certainly was not an option during big Rockets games. So this Saturday night, I stayed up to watch the game. I hadn't really slept the night before and was physically and emotionally drained. But I was sitting on our couch late Saturday night and felt comfortable for the first time all day. I knew somewhere he was watching with me, except this time, when the final second ticked off the clock, my phone didn't ring. Saturday night, I didn't receive that call. Saturday night, I went to bed with an exceedingly heavy heart. I can't describe the feeling I had waiting in my bed for it, but that's not the point. I knew he was watching that game, and I truly know he's in a better place now. Yet for me, this will be the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with. Selfishly, I wish I had gotten to see him one more time, and I know the same can be said for everyone in this room. But unfortunately, I'm learning that that's not how life works. It always happens too soon. However, his legacy will forever be cemented in our hearts because of the way in which he impacted those around him. He's the funniest, most genuine and intelligent man I know, and I will always cherish and remember everything he's done for me. He taught me countless life lessons and countless ways to pull practical jokes on my future kids and grandkids. But above all, he was nothing but amazing to myself, Jacob, Orly, and Gabriel. You were a tremendous grandfather whom we will all look up to our entire lives. Lador Vador, which in Hebrew literally means from generation to generation. So in that light, Saba, I can't wait to continue your tradition of waking up my future grandkids with those late night sports calls and practical jokes on their birthdays. Thank you for everything. I will always love you and miss you.
Uzi Halevy was born to Asher and Shoshana Halevy in Jerusalem in 1936. He grew up with his sister Ada. He was the 11th generation born Israeli. His mother Shoshana came from a line of great rabbis. She was a storyteller, the keeper of the family traditions about pre-state Israel and the Jews returning to their land. His father Asher also came from a great line of rabbis. Uzi's father's grandfather was an Av Beit Din. And so here's a story that defines who he is and where he comes from. He was the rabbi in charge of legal halachic rulings, Uzi's great-grandfather. And once there was a question about the halachic nature of the Jewish identity of some Jews in Kuchin, Iraq, and he was sent there to make a determination. He ruled that the Jews in question were indeed Jews. And so many years later, one Shabbat at Shul, Uzi's father, Asher, was approached by an elderly Jew from Kuchin that his grandfather had ruled was a Jew. And so the elderly Jew came up to his father, kissed his hand in gratitude, and then when Asher was offered an aliyah, he gave it to the Jew from Kuchin instead. These were Uzi's parents. This is where he came from. This was his Judaism, his history, his culture, his sense of adventure. This is the world into which he was raised. And so it's no wonder that he became a man who was larger than life, a man who carried the Israeli spirit of indomitable enthusiasm with him all of his life. The word no wasn't a possibility in his universe. There was no challenge that couldn't be overcome. There were no limits. There were no boundaries. He lived and breathed the Israeli motto, Im tirtzu ein zo agada. If you will it, it is no dream. If you want it badly enough, it can happen. And if you work hard enough and you work smart enough, it will happen. Uzi was a firstborn, born of firstborns, and so he had lots of cousins and his sister around him. He was born into patriarchy, a born leader, born to take care of the people around him. He had a wonderful, loving childhood in Jerusalem. He was bright and clever, and he excelled at school. And he did have a certain playful streak, that twinkle in his eye that stayed with him into adulthood. He went to high school at Tichon Beit HaKerem, the same high school as Mickey, but they didn't really meet there as they were in different programs, Mickey in the humanities and Uzi in math and science. A few years later, Mickey's mother met Uzi's father, and when the mothers get together, things tend to happen. And they finally met on kibbutz in 1954, and they were both serving in the army in the Nachal unit. And before long, Uzi was recognized as a leader, and he was called into 150, the elite 150th unit, to do some special reconnaissance. Adventures ensued. It suffices to say that Uzi followed rules when the rules made sense. When they didn't make sense, he had a way of making things happen in spite of the rules. Justice, doing the right thing, always trumped what the rules had to say. After the army, Uzi studied at the Technion, and Mickey went to Hebrew University, and so they were apart during the week, but always managed to get together for Shabbat. He spent 4 years studying engineering, then 2 years in the master's program for mechanical and nuclear engineering. His gratitude for his education at the Technion developed into a lifelong project to support the Technion. And after school, he started his career in a steel mill and then found his way to a petrochemical plant in Haifa, and that's where they started their family. Israel had only one petrochemical plant, and Uzi had big dreams and unquenchable curiosity, and so it wasn't enough. So off they went to America for 3 years to expand his knowledge and fulfill a dream. He found a job in Wichita, Kansas, went to work for the Litwin Engineering, which was owned by Fred Levine's uncle. And so that Houston connection began. They came for 3 years, and they stayed for a lot longer than that. Uzi was a hard worker with a keen intellect and an iron will, and so he began to climb the corporate ladder. As you would imagine, the social politics of the oil and gas industry weren't naturally welcoming to Uzi Halevy from Yerushalayim. But Uzi had a brilliant mind and an incredible work ethic, and he could do anything he set his mind to. He had that Israeli edge. Like his ancestors who built the land of Israel before him, he knew how to be resourceful. He knew how to dream, and then figured out how to make those dreams come true. He made the impossible happen. He outbid his competition by saying he could do the same project in half the time at a third of the cost, and it'd be twice as good. And then he did it. Despite his success, he was passed up a few times to become president, but his patience paid off when it became clear that he was simply the best there was. Uzi Halevy from Yerushalayim became the president of Litwin Engineering. He ran the company with fairness and loyalty. He ran the company with an even hand and gave respect to his employees. He didn't hire recklessly in good times, and so he didn't have to lay off people in the challenging times. He cared about his people. He traveled the world in his global network, including Eastern Europe, Russia, Czechoslovakia, Romania. His premier project was building a refinery in St. Croix, what was then the largest refinery in the world. And all the while, Uzi was an unbelievable family man, a husband, a father who was larger than life, a born patriarch. He was beyond successful in his career, and he was above and beyond successful as a father. Of all the things he did for his kids, perhaps the most precious, the most valuable was he stood as a role model for what it means to be caring and selfless and loving. He lived to serve his family. If there was a need, he met it. If there was a desire, he filled it. He made dreams come true with a phone call, with an idea, with a story. He jumped on a plane at moment's notice. He gave awesome, thoughtful presents, told incredible, funny bedtime stories that have lasted through the generations. He traveled the world, but he was home for Shabbat. He ran a company, and he drove his kids to their birthday parties. He rose to the top of his field, and he helped his kids with their homework, occasionally giving them more of an education than they asked for. And he didn't do it for validation. He possessed the midot of a true Hasid, serving his family unconditionally, with no expectation or reward in return. He did it because he loved to do it, only wanting happiness and joy and success for his kids. And when his children married, he accepted his new son and daughter-in-law like his own children. And when the grandchildren came, his love and his service knew no limits. His children and his grandchildren always see Uzi as invincible, larger than life. He had a magical, mystical quality about him, joyful and optimistic, curious and playful. Good things seemed to come his way. His grandchildren remember special vacations and cruises, swimming with the dolphins. They remember his constant and loving presence. Through it all, he remained a loyal citizen of Israel all his life. He followed Israel in the news every day. He raised awareness and money for the Technion. He never forgot his roots. His heart was always connected with Israel. He was strong in his opinions, but always willing to engage and listen in conversation. He was a leader in the World Affairs Council. He traveled the world on their behalf. He belonged to the Texas-Israel Chamber of Commerce, a monthly men's discussion group. Every Thursday, he met for lunch with an Arab-Jewish dialogue group. A sense of belonging was important to him, and he always wanted his children and grandchildren to feel connected to relatives and friends and community. Uzi touched so many lives, and he'll be missed in his many roles. Uzi leaves an aspirational legacy for us all. And so we remember all of these essential, beautiful characteristics, and we allow those characteristics to live eternally in all of us. He was loving and caring and forgiving. He was a protector. He was curious and intelligent, resourceful and determined. He was a Hasid in his giving and in his selflessness. He took pleasure in simple delights. He was totally present in the moment for those around him. He was funny, creative, positive, hopeful, playful, simply magical. And so this is a moment of transition. Uzi has taught you well. He's taught you by example. He's taught you through his words. And so all of these characteristics, these blessings, now transition to you, his children, his grandchildren, and to all of us who were touched by his life. Ledor vador, from generation to generation, we can rise up and give honor to his life by accepting upon ourselves some part of his life's mission. It's not going to be easy because he led an extraordinary life, But the world still needs that kind of strength and devotion and hope. May we all strive to carry on his spirit. May all of us live as he would want us to live. And in that way, may his memory truly be for a blessing. Together we say amen. Amen. Friends, following the service here, the interment will take place at Bekishuren Cemetery on Post Oak. And the family would like to invite you to a Shiva Minyan tonight, Tuesday night, and Wednesday night at 6 p.m. at the St. James on Del Monte Drive in the Galleria area. And so come and share your own Uzi stories. We'll now recite the El Malay as we pray that Uzi's soul finds rest and peace in the next world. Let's rise for the El Malay. El Malay Rachamim Shochen Bamromim Hamtze Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Ashchina B'malot Kedoshim Utehorim K'zohar Harakia Mazirim Et Nishmat Uzi Ben Asher V'Shoshana Shehalach Le'olamo Began Eden Tehei Menuchato Ana Ba'al Harachamim Hastirehu B'Seter Knafecha Le'olamim Utzror B'Tzra Chaim Et Nishmato Adonai Hu Nachalato V'yanuach b'shalom mishkavo v'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Uzi Halevy, Uzi ben Asher v'Shoshana, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace, and together we say, Amen.